government cover-ups and ancient giants, the secrets they buried. They discovered something that shouldn't exist: skeletons towering over 10 feet tall, buried deep in American soil. Within decades, every trace vanished from museum records, and the evidence disappeared as if it never existed. What did the Smithsonian Institution desperately want to hide from the world? Throughout the 1800s, newspapers across America exploded with shocking discoveries: giant human remains unearthed from ancient burial mounds. Farmers and archaeologists stumbled upon massive skeletons that challenged everything we knew about human history. These bones were collected, documented, and then systematically erased from official records. Today, we're uncovering one of history's most controversial cover-ups: the wave of giant discoveries. Between 1850 and 1920, over 1,500 newspaper articles documented the discovery of unusually large human skeletons across North America. These weren't isolated incidents or sensationalized rumors. They were official reports published in respected publications like the New York Times, Chicago Tribune, and local gazettes from Ohio to California. In 1883, workers excavating a burial mound in West Virginia unearthed a skeleton measuring nearly 11 feet in length. The local newspaper reported that the skull was massive, with teeth perfectly intact, and the bone structure suggested a humanoid being of extraordinary proportions. Similar discoveries emerged from Minnesota, where a skeleton measuring 10 feet was found alongside ancient copper tools and ceremonial artifacts. Perhaps the most documented case came from Lovelock Cave in Nevada during 1911. Miners discovered red-haired mummies ranging from 8 to 10 feet tall, perfectly preserved in the dry cave environment. The Paiute tribe's oral traditions spoke of the Siteka, red-haired giants who once inhabited the region. The physical evidence seemed to confirm these ancient legends. The Smithsonian connection. This is where the narrative takes a dark turn. According to multiple historical accounts, the Smithsonian Institution actively collected these giant remains under the guise of preservation and study. Eyewitness testimonies from the late 1800s describe Smithsonian representatives arriving at discovery sites, carefully packing the enormous bones, and transporting them to Washington, D.C. But here's the chilling part. Once these specimens entered Smithsonian custody, they disappeared completely. Researchers attempting to locate these skeletons in modern archives hit a wall of missing records, lost documentation, and official denials. The institution claims no such remains ever existed in their collection. In 1894, the Smithsonian published a report acknowledging excavations at various mound sites across the Midwest. The report mentioned unusual findings, but conspicuously avoided any reference to oversized human remains, despite contemporary newspaper accounts from those exact locations describing giant skeletons being shipped to the institution. Eyewitness accounts that refuse to die. James Vieira, a stonemason turned independent researcher, spent over 20 years collecting historical newspaper clippings and eyewitness accounts of giant discoveries. His archive contains testimonies from grave diggers, archaeologists, and local historians who witnessed these findings firsthand. One particularly compelling account comes from Abraham Lincoln himself. In 1848, while visiting Niagara Falls, Lincoln delivered a speech referencing the extinct giants whose bones fill the mounds of America. This wasn't metaphorical language. Lincoln was acknowledging a widely accepted reality of his time. Dr. John Haywood, a respected historian writing in 1823, documented multiple giant skeleton discoveries in Tennessee. He described femur bones that, when measured against average human proportions, would indicate individuals standing between 9 and 12 feet tall. His medical background lent credibility to observations that went beyond mere sensationalism. The scientific pushback. Modern archaeology dismisses these claims as misidentification, exaggeration, or outright hoaxes. The scientific consensus maintains that no evidence supports the existence of giant humans beyond occasional cases of gigantism, a rare medical condition affecting individuals, not entire populations. Skeptics point out that bones can appear larger when partially fossilized, or when animal bones are mistaken for human remains. They argue that untrained observers in the 1800s lacked the expertise to properly identify skeletal material. The absence of physical evidence today, they contend, proves these discoveries were never legitimate. However, this explanation struggles to account for the sheer volume of reports, many coming from trained physicians and scientists of that era. Dr. Samuel Haven, a respected archaeologist who worked with the Smithsonian, wrote extensively about anomalous remains that didn't fit conventional models, before his later publications removed all such references. The destruction of evidence. Perhaps the most damning aspect of this mystery isn't what was found, but what was deliberately destroyed. Multiple historical accounts describe the Smithsonian's practice of dumping problematic remains into the Atlantic Ocean or incinerating them. A leaked 1920s internal memo, whose authenticity remains disputed, allegedly showed correspondence between Smithsonian administrators discussing the disposal of controversial specimens that contradicted accepted evolutionary timelines. Whether this document is genuine or fabricated, it reflects the suspicions many researchers harbor about institutional cover-ups. In 2014, the Supreme Court supposedly ruled against the Smithsonian in a case involving the release of documents related to the destruction of giant skeleton remains. However, this claim has been thoroughly debunked as a satirical article that went viral, demonstrating how eagerly people embrace conspiracy theories in the absence of transparent information. Why would they hide it? If these discoveries were real, what motivation would drive such an elaborate cover-up? Several theories attempt to explain the alleged suppression. The prevailing archaeological narrative in the late 1800s was building toward a cohesive understanding of human evolution and migration patterns. Giant human remains didn't fit neatly into these theories, potentially disrupting decades of academic work and challenging the emerging scientific consensus. Religious implications also factor into the equation. Biblical references to giants, the Nephilim, suggest these beings existed in ancient times. Confirming their physical existence would validate religious texts in ways that made secular institutions uncomfortable, blurring the carefully maintained line between faith and science. Control of historical narratives grants power to institutions. If official organizations acknowledge they were wrong about fundamental aspects of human history, it opens the door to questioning other established truths. Maintaining authority requires consistency, even when evidence suggests revision. The evidence that remains. Despite the alleged cover-up, fragments of evidence persist in unexpected places. Photographs from the early 1900s show excavation teams standing beside unusually large human remains. While skeptics dismiss these as fraudulent or misinterpreted, the images continue circulating, keeping the mystery alive. The Catalina Island Museum in California houses artifacts from Native American sites, including reports of 7-foot skeletons discovered in the 1920s. While not quite reaching the mythical proportions of earlier claims, these remains still represent individuals significantly larger than average populations of that time. Oral traditions from indigenous tribes across North America consistently reference ancient giants. The Paiute, Cherokee, Choctaw, and numerous other nations maintain stories of encounters with massive beings who inhabited the land before modern tribes. These cultural memories, passed down through countless generations, align suspiciously well with the newspaper reports from excavation sites on tribal lands. Modern implications. This controversy raises profound questions about institutional transparency and who controls our understanding of history. In an age where information flows freely and cover-ups seem increasingly difficult to maintain, the giant skeleton mystery persists because it touches on deeper anxieties about truth and authority. Whether these discoveries represent genuine anomalies suppressed by institutions protecting their credibility, or simply reflect the limitations of 19th-century scientific methods and sensationalist journalism, the story refuses to fade. The absence of definitive proof works both ways. Believers point to the vanished evidence as confirmation of conspiracy, while skeptics cite the same absence as proof the discoveries never happened. What remains undeniable is that hundreds of documented reports described finding oversized human remains. These accounts came from diverse sources across decades and different regions. Something generated all those newspaper articles, eyewitness testimonies, and historical records, even if we can no longer examine the physical evidence. The question nobody wants to answer: if these giant skeletons were fake, the mystery solves itself easily. People lied, newspapers sensationalized stories, and science eventually corrected the record. But that explanation crumbles under scrutiny when you consider the coordinated nature of the alleged cover-up. Records weren't just lost, they were systematically removed. Museum catalogs from the 1890s list specimens by accession numbers, and researchers have identified gaps in these sequences corresponding exactly to the time periods when giant remains were reportedly acquired. The holes in documentation aren't random. They follow a pattern that suggests intentional redaction. Furthermore, the Smithsonian has never adequately explained why so many historical references to their giant skeleton collection simply vanished from later editions of their own publications. Academic papers from the 1880s mention these specimens openly, yet revised versions from the 1920s onward delete all such references without explanation or correction notices. The financial investment required to excavate, transport, and store these massive remains would have been substantial. Institutions don't spend resources on hoaxes. They spend money on discoveries they believe have scientific value. So if the Smithsonian invested in collecting these bones, they initially considered them legitimate. What changed their assessment so dramatically that destruction became preferable to preservation? The pattern extends beyond America. Intriguingly, giant skeleton reports aren't unique to North America. Similar discoveries have been documented in Europe, South America, and even remote Pacific islands. Ancient texts from cultures worldwide reference giants, the Greek Titans, Norse Jotnar, biblical Nephilim, and Polynesian legends of massive ancestral beings. Archaeological anomalies in Peru include elongated skulls and burial sites with unusually large sarcophagi that would accommodate individuals far exceeding normal human dimensions. While mainstream science attributes these to cultural practices like cranial binding, alternative researchers point to skeletal proportions that suggest naturally occurring gigantism on a scale never seen in modern populations. The consistency of these global accounts becomes harder to dismiss as coincidence or cultural mythology when physical structures also hint at builders of extraordinary size. Megalithic constructions from Baalbek to Easter Island feature stones weighing hundreds of tons, moved and precisely placed using methods that baffle modern engineers. Could societies of giant humans explain these impossible achievements? The systematic destruction of records and convenient disappearance of evidence create a puzzle that demands answers. If these findings were merely hoaxes, why did everything need to vanish so completely? Could what they uncovered challenge our understanding of human history so fundamentally that preserving the lie became easier than accepting the truth? If this story opened your eyes to hidden history, smash that subscribe button and hit the bell icon so you never miss our next investigation into the secrets they don't want you to know. Because the biggest question remains: what else are they hiding from us right now?